Hey everyone, we're back, and today we're going to pick up where we left off on finishing up the painting of this landscape. Currently, the landscape is looking pretty good, except for the fact that there is only one, what we refer to as a paint layer, in the sense that our landscape material only is one set of textures. We've got an albedo texture and a normal map. So if we go back here, you can see it's just comprised of these two texture samples, even though we did a lot of scrambling and randomizing. I should tell you that in your absence, after I finished editing that video, I did change some things in this just because they were driving me crazy. For example, I added question marks to all of my Booleans, and I did mention that in the video. And also I wanted to simplify the renaming of all of the parameter nodes so I didn't have to do as much typing. So I changed it from whatever it was before, and now you can see that every parameter that deals with this paint layer for the cracked mud, I just preceded the name of the parameter with the word mud, okay? Mud macro variation large, etc. You can see mud macro exposure. You can see mud macro contrast, and so on. So everything that is parameterized right now is just called mud. And that propagated, by the way, as soon as I made those changes and saved them and all that. If we look at our material instance, you can see that everything has changed there as well. It inherits that. So right now, what is on our landscape is not the material instance. So let me get the material instance back on there. This will take a moment. Remember, we want to use the material instance so that we can look at the changes we've made in real time. It already looks a little bit different because I know we dialed in some settings here. Let's make sure that they still look good. Okay, so that ground looks good. And our character, let's face the sun, is looking very good. One of these days, remind me, and I will teach you how to light the character in such a way that it does not affect the rest of the environment. So right under Aerodel, I think that everything looks really, really nice. And in fact, if we zoom out, I don't see any texture tiling at all. So we did a very good job on that yesterday. However, when I look at these hills, they just don't look right. The UV scale is not correct. And frankly, they should be made out of a different substance altogether. And that's what we're going to accomplish today. We're going to get different texture sets and include them in our m_ground master material that will propagate into the material instance. Now you can have as many layers as you'd like, and today, for purposes of simplicity, I think we're going to probably stick with 3. I want to have some sort of rock material for these mountains, and perhaps also a snow that can be at the tops of them. So the first order of business is for me to get back into either Fab or Quixel Bridge. So I see that I got, it doesn't really matter which one I use, so I'll just navigate back to my content directory, and let me see if I can open up Bridge. And remember, if Bridge won't open for you, window menu, Quixel Bridge. If that doesn't open, all you got to do is save your progress and restart Unreal. I'm going to save myself the trouble right now and just use Fab, which is more reliable. And these texture sets are just going to end up in a different location. So I am logged in. I want you to take note of that. So if you need to sign into Fab, do that with your Epic credentials, and you do that right here. But I'm already signed in, and I'm going to click the hamburger icon right over here. And I'm going to go into my library. So this is the things that I know that I own. And here I've got some categories of things that I can explore, such as materials and textures. So we'll click that and we'll wait a moment. Oh, yes, we will. Okay. And let's go ahead and look for some Quixel textures. This is it's not really filtering just by Quixel. Maybe if I add Quixel right here. Maybe that will help. Oh no, I know that I have many, many more Quixel textures than this, which is why I like to use Bridge instead, because Fab is still a little bit messed up in this regard. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to hit pause and I'm going to restart the editor so that I can use Bridge. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back and it's time to see if this worked. So we're going to go to the window menu and I'm going to select Quixel Bridge. Yep, just usually requires a restart. So let's dock that. And as before, it's trying to get us to go to Fab, and I'm not going to recommend that right now. So I'll hit stay here. Megascans have a new home on Fab. Visit Fab. Okay, I get it, but it's not helpful to me today. So let's go to surfaces. And I think I want to find some rock to use for the mountains. And there's one asset that I know that I like a lot. It's called, you know what? I forgot what it's called. Is it Rock Cliff? It's one of these. One of them looks better than the other. I think it might be this one, but I'm just going to look a little bit more in case I forgot something. A lot of them, that's a little too geometric, I think. So let's go ahead and use Rock Cliff for this. I think that will work out nicely. And again, I'm downloading this at medium quality. Remember, this is going to be seen from a distance. It's not going to need very, very high resolution. So I'll download that. We'll wait for the download to complete. Doesn't take very long, especially because it's medium quality. And I'll add it to my project by clicking there. And we'll find it later. It's going to be probably in our Megascans folder. Might as well verify that right now. Surfaces, Rock Cliff. Okay, so that's what we just got. We already had our cracked mud from previously because that's what this is. But now we've also got the textures for the Rock Cliff and a material instance provided by Quixel that we are not going to use. All right, we're going to go back into Bridge. And now I think I want some snow. So here is the snow category. And right away, I like this one, and I'll download that oh, it looks like I've already downloaded this one. If you already have downloaded a texture set, it's probably still in your Vault cache or in some other cache that saves your Megascans, and all that does is it means that you don't have to download it again the next time you want to add it to your project. So since I've already downloaded this, all I have to do is hit add in this case. Go back to surfaces, and there it is, my snow. And again, we're going to be making use of just the diffuse maps and the normal maps, and we'll save a discussion for ORD maps for some other time. But I want to go back to my master material for this landscape, and currently the material instance is what is on there. To find the master material easily, you can always double-click and open the material instance, and you can see where it says parent right here, m_ground. I can double-click that and find my parent material very, very easily. This is going to depend on a node that you haven't seen yet, which is called a landscape layer blend node. So to get that, you're going to right-click, landscape layer. Okay, and it's this one right here, landscape layer blend. And this is an array, actually, and we're going to have three different paint layers. So I'm going to add array elements to this while that node is selected. 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to name these according to which paint layer they're supposed to represent. So here for index 1, okay, we have got this node highlighted. For index 1, you want to twirl that down and give it a name. I'm going to call this layer mud. Don't change anything else here. And really, very little of this matters. If you wanted to, you could take your preview weight, and I would say that it would do no harm to set this to 3.333, something like that. And I'll explain the reason for that in just a moment. Now for index 1, remember this is 0 indexed. So the first index is mud. The next one is going to be called rock. And we'll set the preview weight for that to 3.333 as well. And index 2, that'll be our snow layer. And as I enter these, notice that it's updating on the landscape layer blend node. Okay, and the preview weight here can be 3.333 as well. Okay, so I'm going to just for now comment this out, see, and I'm going to call this albedo. And we're going to have to make a duplicate of this layer blend node. So I'll hit Control D. If that doesn't work, if you're on a Mac and that doesn't work, you can just copy and paste. So I'll make another one. And I'll comment this one out, hitting the letter C, normals. Okay? So we're going to be needing both of these. Now, this was already a lot of work, and it's going to seem at first like we have a ton of stuff to do. But in reality, we don't really, because most of this stuff we can just reuse, except for the fact that we're going to have to replace the albedo texture and the normal map for each layer. So let me move both of these just aside for the time being, and I'm going to disconnect this layer from base color and normal. Now, everything here, everything, I can copy, Control C or Command C. I'll click down here, just click and paste. Maybe try to just line everything up so that it looks comparable. And we're going to do it again. So I'll paste another copy down here and get them all lined up. Now, it's the textures, really, that have to be replaced. So let's pull up our content browser, and we're going to go into the Megascans folder, which is where we downloaded those texture sets. Under Surfaces, let's go into our rock first. Double-click, and I'm going to grab the albedo texture and the normal map and just drag them into the graph where our rock layer is. So up top, that's our mud layer. In fact, I could comment all of this. Mud. Okay, and we'll do that again for the other two groups. Let me just move these textures aside again. And I will highlight all of this. Yeah, I'm running out of room. Gotta get all of this stuff out of the way. I don't have enough room for my comment box. So I'll just go like this, and then I'll put these back where they were. All right, so now I should have enough room. Comment this out. See? And this is going to be rock. And down here, we can comment this out as snow. So first, let's concentrate on our rock layer. Okay, so we've already basically finished our mud layer. Notice that nothing at this point is connected to the result node, so there's really nothing to see. But we know that these two textures are just a copy of what we used up here, and they must not be because they have to be rock. So what we'll do is we will replace them. Here is the appropriate normal map for the rock, and here's the appropriate albedo for the rock. So what we can do is we can disconnect these, delete them, and then reconnect the shifted UVs from the texture variation node into both of these for the time being. And that's all for now. Maybe what I would do is, because I already know that the base UVs for this, because it's going to be seen from a much greater distance, that the base UVs, and yes, we do have to, I'm afraid we are going to have to go through and manually rename all of our parameters because we can't have multiple parameters with the same names. So let's just do that quickly. I'll select this first parameter, highlight the word mud, call it rock. And I'll do the same thing for every other named parameter. Rock. This is a parameter. Rock. I know it is a little bit tiresome, but it doesn't take that long. Rock. Certainly would take a lot longer if we had to make them from scratch every time. So mud base UVs, and I'll get back to what I want to do with those in just a moment. So we'll say rock. And while I'm here, I'm not going to leave that set to 1 by default. Maybe I'll set that to 0.05, right? Because we know that we're going to be viewing that from a much greater distance. So I want to see it sort of at a larger scale. Okay, so you remember that the smaller the number, when we multiply our landscape coordinates, is sort of going to zoom in on the texture and make it appear larger. All right, so I've renamed that. So let's rename this rock, and we'll change that one. And right now, this is what I'm doing. So if you want to fast forward through this part, you can. Rock. This is just a thing that we've got to do. And let's see, that one, rock. And let's see if there's anything else that was parameterized. Yep, this macro contrast, that will be rock. And I think we are in pretty good shape here. So let me just pull these textures out here, and that'll make it easier for me to attach my multiply to the output of this one. Okay, so I'll bring that in just a little bit. Okay, I hope I didn't miss any. And these are now the correct 2 textures to use. And we are going to multiply the output of the lerp by the base texture, or the albedo texture here, the RGB out, in the same way that we did for our mud layer. Not for the normal map, but just for the albedo map. And remember, we have these 2 nodes standing by, okay? And this is what's going to be blending them all. So let's proceed now, and we'll do our final layer here, which is going to be snow. And I might as well start out by renaming all the named parameters, since we were doing that anyway. Snow, snow, snow. Macro exposure, we'll set that to snow as well. The base UVs for the snow, which I also want to change because that's going to be viewed from a greater distance. So let's default that to 0.05 as well. And we've got our texture variation parameters here. So we're going to call that snow, that first one. And this one will change to snow. This one will change to snow. This one, change to snow. And this one, we'll change that to snow. I know this is tremendously exciting, and these are the wrong textures. So let's bring up our content browser. We'll go back into surfaces and get our snow textures. We're going to get the albedo and the normal map for those. And we're going to have to replace the 2 that are already there. So I can just simply highlight and delete them. Connect the shifted UVs into both of these texture samples. And like we did with the previous layer, remember that the RGB out of the albedo texture is multiplied with the output of that lerp. And let me look this over. Yep, that still says mud, so we want to change that to snow. And I want to be sure that I haven't left anything out, because it's all going to propagate out to our material instance, and I don't want anything incorrectly labeled. So I think we're in good shape at this point, and now we've got these landscape layer blend nodes, and I have 2 of them because one of them is going to take in, for each layer, the albedo textures. And then the other one is going to take in the normal maps. And the reason for this, that I set the preview weight to 3.333, is basically, I didn't have to really do that necessarily. But what's going to happen is that once everything is connected to the result node, the combination of all of these layers is going to be projected onto the preview mesh. So the parameter that I adjusted here, where I set it to, excuse me, I've got to select one of these layer blend nodes. The reason I set it to 3.333 is because I want to get an equal amount, I guess, of each one. If, for example, I set the preview weight of this one to 1 and the others to 0, I would only see the cracked mud. If I set this to 0 and then I set this one to 1 and the last one to 0, I would only see rock. So you get the idea. However many layers you have in your layered landscape material, divide that into 100 and try to get as close as you can. All right, it's not that important. And even if you don't do this at all, it's not going to affect the final outcome, but it will just project itself onto the preview mesh. All right, so let's move the albedo and the result node way up here. And for our first layer, which is the cracked mud, the output of the multiply goes into layer mud. And this multiply, might as well bring it way up here, is going to go into the rock. And this multiply, might as well bring it up here as well, and plug that into the layer snow. And finally, you're going to take the output of this albedo landscape layer blend node and plug that into base color. Okay, and the preview should start to appear there. And of course, we have yet to really adjust the UVs properly, so it's not going to look right until we tweak a little bit in our material instance. And by the way, I want to remind you that I already set specular manually to 0 and roughness to 1. If I wanted to, I might as well do this just to show you. If I've already set those, I can right-click and promote it to a parameter. And this is just global in this case, but the specular is 0. It's going to inherit whatever value you type in there. And my roughness, I can promote that to a variable, and that should be set to 1. I could do the same with metallic or anything else, okay? So we'll be able to adjust that from within the material instance as well because they're parameters. And now we have to do like we did for the albedo. We want to do something similar for the normals. So here is my first normal. I think it's my first normal. Yep, that's for our mud layer. And we're going to go get the RGB out from the next normal map, which is rock, and plug that in. And then the final normal, RGB out, can go into the layer snow. And I missed, darn it. So I have to do that again. Okay, scroll down, grab it. I'll be more careful this time. And layer snow. And that's going to go into my normals. So right now we're seeing kind of like a blend of everything on here. And just to make a point, let's set each one of these preview weights to 0. And yeah, right there, we'll set that to 0 as well. So now we don't see anything, right? But if I were to set my preview weight for my first layer to 1 and the others to 0, we would only see the rock. But that's only important to the way that it's being projected onto this preview mesh. So let's set that to 0. And if I wanted to look at the rock, I'm sorry, that was the mud a second ago. If I want to look at the rock, I could set that to 1. The UVs are all wrong for that, but remember, that's going to be viewed from a distance, and it will look much better from a distance. Now, if that was an 8K or 16K texture, it would still look fantastic, but remember, it does not need to be anything like that. So we'll zero that out, and then we'll use the preview weight down here for the snow, and I'll type a 1. Okay, and there's our snow texture that we're going to use. And none of this actually matters to what anything's going to look like on your landscape. Okay, so this is looking very good. I'll hit apply. Wait for that to apply. And then I'll save. And I'll check our material instance, which is still docked. And all of our newly named parameters are here for us to enable and adjust now on our landscape. So let's enable everything. And a few more down here. And we should have a couple more vectors right here. The macro contrast for the rock and the macro contrast for the snow. And I think that's everything. So let's save the material instance and go back outside. Now, right now, the landscape is going to turn all funny. It's going to go black on you, and that is normal, okay? Do not panic. Everything is still okay. And we still have that material instance as our assigned landscape material. So in order to fix this part, the next step is to go back into landscape mode. And we're going to, this time, we're going to go to the Paint tab. Now, in this first layer, you're going to see, that's why when we made the landscape in the first place, I emphasized that you're going to want to have that Enable Edit Layers checked. Because this first layer, I don't want it to contain any paint. I just want this to be our height map. So I will right-click on it. And actually, I don't need to right-click on it at all. I can simply lock it and then rename it height map. Because that's just the basic geometry of the level. I want to create a separate layer for the paint. To do that, where it says height map, I'll right-click on there and choose Create. And now this layer, I want to rename Paint. So we're going to rename it Paint, like so. All right, so forgive me. I did have to pause the recording there for a second because something did bug out and I had to restart the editor. When you go into paint mode, you should see all of your layers appear here. And when I went into the paint tab in landscape mode, I didn't see them there and I panicked a little bit and had to troubleshoot it. So basically all I did is restarted the editor and now they're there. So we have already made this paint layer and I don't want you to have any paint added to the height map. So let's select the paint layer first. And now we're going to do a few preliminary steps to get everything ready. The thing about all these layers is that for each one of them, and this is going to sound a lot harder than it is, but it's practically automatic. We have to create a special asset for each one of these, which is called a layer info asset. And this is easy. All you have to do is click the spot. Look, it's even labeled for you. It's got a tooltip, create layer info. When I click that, you're going to select this first option, weight blended layer normal, and it'll even make a folder for you, outside or whatever your level name and shader assets. So you're going to click save there, and you're going to do that for the other two as well. Okay, so we're going to wait for that to think, unless it's in the process of crashing again. I hope it isn't. Yeah, it just finished. What should happen is that as soon as the layer info is made, it'll display here. You're going to need to save that, obviously, but you will see that material on your landscape appear. So I'm going to save that. And now I'm going to do the same thing for the rock layer and the snow layer. So we'll click the plus button, weight blended layer normal, save. And then we'll select that, save it. Weight blended layer normal, save, highlight it, and save it. Great. Okay, so now we're kind of back to where we were. If I go back into selection mode, we still have that same material everywhere. Okay, but now we have the ability to do some really cool stuff here. Let's go to maybe one of these mountains over here where... Or maybe I'll just change where the sun is for the time being. Hold on a second. So I really want you to see this in good light. Okay, So take these hills, for example. They're not supposed to be made out of the same material that the ground is made out of. That's all wrong. So let's go back into landscape mode again. Make sure you're not in the sculpt tab this time, but be in the paint tab. And what you want to do is, if you don't see anything on your landscape yet after you have made these layer infos, what I would recommend that you do is have your paint layer selected and then right-click on the layer that you want to start with and just choose Fill Layer. Let me show you what that would look like. I'm going to clear this layer. We're still in the paint layer, and it might still look like this. If it does, you're going to right-click and just click Fill Layer. And we'll wait a moment. It should come back. Okay. Now, that took a little longer than I expected, so I do have to admit that I had a little heart attack there. But anyway, we're all right. And now I have this brush tool. Now, relative to the landscape, the brush tool, unfortunately, is really, 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 really small, even if I increase the brush size to maximum. Okay, so look at that brush size. It's tiny compared to this vast landscape that ultimately an artist would have to paint. So let's go back to selection mode for just a second so I can get close to my player start, figure out what I'm looking at. All right, and it looks like the player start is, I'm going to rotate that player start so it's looking in the opposite direction because these hills are illuminated better. All right, so let's get up to where they should be rock mountains and go back into paint mode. Not mesh paint. I'm sorry, we're going to go into landscape mode and the paint tab. Now, your tool strength, I would recommend leaving it something other than 100% because even if it's set to 0.3, you can get 100% coverage just by, painting repeatedly over the same little area. The brush fall off, though, I usually do like to adjust that almost, if not all the way up. That way, the outer radius is going to create a blend where it intersects with the ground. Okay, so let's make that a little bit better. Okay, so we've got a tool strength, and we've got a brush size, and we've set our brush fall off. Our brush type is the normal type, and we want to make sure that this paint button here is clicked. Now, if I were to start painting right now, you would not see anything because we'd be painting mud on top of mud, and that would not make a difference. So if I want to paint rock, I have to choose rock. So let's do a little bit of an experiment here. And it's okay if that happens. It might have to think for a second. And I'm painting some rock. I hope you can see it. Onto this thing that ought to be a mountain. And I'm doing this in one shot because I'm going to undo it in just a moment after we adjust the settings in the material instance so that we know that this looks good. And I want to paint enough area so I can really evaluate it. It's already looking pretty good. Okay, but because that's a separate layer, if I go into the material instance and just drag it off the dock just like I always have, remember, now we've got parameters for every paint layer. So if I go to my rock base UVs, for example, I can adjust that in real time and find just the UVs that I like. 0.01, I think I might round that off to 0.0125. Actually, I liked it before, 0.126. I think I'm just going to scrub it until I like the way it looks. Right there. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. And we can play with the rock exposure and set it to whatever appeals to us. I think the 0.5 was probably exactly right, however, 0.5. And all of the other controls we still have are macro variation large. This is just for the rock. Yeah, I had to get down into the weeds, into the 0.000 range for that to actually be visible. And medium. Yeah, let's set that to 0.0000. Because remember, that's a far larger object than the immediate floor that is being walked upon by Airedale. And let's set that to 0.00006 or something. Chances are you're not going to see very much there. Okay. But once you settle on a good appearance for your rock, you can even use those other parameters in the texture variation. I was searching for that word. Okay, so that looks good. Now, I suppose I could go through and erase all that stuff. For example, if I hold down Shift and I go over this enough, especially if I were to set my tool strength all the way up, I can erase any paint that I've done there. Or I can go to this paint layer, right-click, and choose Clear, Paint, Rock. And it will all disappear. Okay, so now I'm happy with the way that the rock looks. I wish that I could make the brush larger, but it's already set to its maximum size. So it's going to take some time, honestly, to paint this entire landscape. And this is just a 2K landscape. This is relatively small. But let's do a little. And maybe I will even increase the tool strength some, so I don't have to do as many passes. And I don't want full tool strength because I want some of the other material to kind of be at least partially visible through the rock. And this is just a matter of patience. Okay, so I'm going to continue to paint this area. I think we are within the vicinity of the player's start. So I'll pause the video and I will resume once I'm done painting some rock in this area. Okay, I spent some time painting some rock onto these mountains here. By far, I've got a lot more landscape to go. But let's look at this from Airedale's perspective. And you can see what's beginning to take shape here, right? This is starting to look a lot more appropriate from a distance. We no longer see the texture tiling on the mountains because we adjusted the UV scale and the texture variation for those uniquely, separately from the ground, right? So that is going to make for a more convincing landscape. What else can I do? Remember, we've got one more paint layer to work with, and that's snow. So let me hit Escape, and I'll get some snow on top of the mountains and maybe little tufts of snow here and there on the walkable area of the landscape here. So I'll be right back. Okay, so while we were away, I painted a little bit of snow. I focused most of my snow painting in areas that I thought were at higher elevations. So let me just remind you how I did that. I was in landscape mode. In the paint tab, I had to select the snow layer, and I did like a little audition. I painted some snow and had a look at it, and then I went back into my material instance and played around with like the base UVs for the snow and the macro variation. Not very much. I could probably do even more at this point. So let's see. Mud, 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 mud. Rock, 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 rock. Snow base UVs. And adjust that. Now you can see where the snow is, by the way. Okay? So we'll adjust the base UVs for the snow, not into the negatives, preferably. Yeah. That looks pretty good. Remember, you can do this in real time. I'm basically just trying to follow the contours of the peaks here, where I think that there ought to be snow. And I blended a little bit down here. One cool thing that you can do, I'm not going to bother doing any of the texture variation stuff on the snow right now because I think you already get that point. But there's also a smoothing parameter here. And what you can do is a smoothing pass so that there's not a harsh transition between two material types, especially where, let's say, the rock and snow meet the walkable area of this terrain. And this is also subject to your tool strength. So if I turn that all the way up, then the smoothing will be more aggressive. Frankly, if I was going to drop some snow in little patches here, I would probably do a different layer of snow that's scaled differently, because this is scaled to be seen from far away, but not up close. So we could have a snow close layer and a snow far layer, anything like that. But the world is starting to come alive, I think, for Airedale. Now we've got some snowy mountaintops. You could see I don't have complete coverage over here. And you can see also the effects of smoothing. I run over here. So that's a gradient type. Okay, so I'm back, and I'm really sorry I had to pause the video. My disk got full. So I better wrap this up quickly, and I think we left off in play mode, if I'm not mistaken. And Airedale's world is coming to life, and you can see the effect of smoothing over here so that there's not a harsh transition from the mud layer, the cracked mud layer, and the rock and snow that's on the big mountains. I think it looks really, really nice. The shadows look great. And we also have this. I can't get enough of that. It's going to take more than 7 seconds, though. So let's shoot over here. Gives you a sense for just how far away that is. My goodness. That's much better. And you haven't seen how to do that yet. By the way, did you notice that the screen is kind of shaking a little bit? I'm not going to do it for that one. I've got to hit something. So that's a lot of fun. Okay, so we're building a world, and this is just too much fun. And you can see I put some lens flares because I'm trying to pretend that I'm J.J. Abrams. I did that in my post-process phone, and I just love casting spells. All right, that's it for this round, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.